let's move to college football.
Works for me.
I mean, come on, man. Fuck it. You know what I mean? Anyway, college fucking football. All right.
It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. For you people who think Alabama isn't for real, I think they are. And I'm going to tell you what, I think they're sneaky fast. I think a lot of people look at Alabama as just some plotters lining up in between the tackles. They're not going to have a lot of speed. There's no way they could keep up with Florida State. I think Bama will smash Florida State. I think they will smash Ohio State, and they will smash Baylor. I really do.
I'm going to go, I don't know. I don't think they'll smash Florida State. I think Florida State's got that speed, man. They got that southeastern speed too, brother. They got a lot of good athletes down in Florida. So I think they're all coming from the same region. So it's a lot to be said for that. You know, you see where these guys are coming from. Texas, Florida, Georgia, you know. Florida State gets a lot of those recruits too. And,
yeah, they do. But the thing is, the one thing that Florida State doesn't have is a senior quarterback who's working on winning his third national title. And that's the one thing Alabama has. And look, Jameis Winston is a phenomenal athlete. But when it comes to, and I think he will win the Heisman. But when it comes down to if they're undefeated, and they should, I mean, their toughest game left is Florida. And Florida is backsliding. They just lost to Vanderbilt. They are not looking good. They're asking for their coach to be fired. I think they're 4-5 or 4 and.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, man. As much as I want to see Florida State in a national championship, all the teams that they're playing are fucking them up right now. Miami just got hit and fucking lost to Virginia Tech. That doesn't help them. Florida is backsliding like shit. That does not help them. You know what I'm saying? So their wins don't look as good. I mean, obviously their win against Clemson is very effective and helps them out, but. I mean, now, and then you got Ohio State. They're going to have a Big 10 championship, and then now Baylor's in the mix.
Well, and you know what advantage Baylor has over those other all the teams in front of them? They don't play a conference championship game.
That will hurt them, though. I mean,
I don't think so. I think if they run the table and they're undefeated, if they run the table and they're undefeated, and Florida State and Ohio State catch a loss, they're going to play Alabama for a national title. If Alabama has one loss. And Baylor runs the table, Baylor's going to play in the national title because they still have to play. They just beat the brakes off of Oklahoma. I mean, they're not playing bums. I mean, they have to play.
If they all run the table. Yeah, if any of those guys catch a loss, Baylor's in there because right now in the BCS they're ranked at number 5.
Right. So and I don't think Ohio State's going to get out of this without losing.
Yeah, I tell you another team though that's working their way in there, man, because their schedule's going to be is good. They took that loss, but now they're going to have a Pac-12 championship at Stanford. You know, but now you're looking at them; they're sitting at 4 in the BCS, and they have a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they could work their way in there. They could even stay ahead of Baylor. If Baylor didn't have right now they're ahead of Baylor.
And the unfortunate thing for the teams that are ranked 5 through 10, because I'm looking at the AP that has Baylor at 4, but Stanford, Oregon, Auburn, Clemson, Missouri, and Texas A&M, they all have at least one loss, and they need these teams in front of them to lose. Now, Auburn has to play Alabama, and that could be Alabama's one loss, and then Alabama's going to have to turn around and play in the SEC title. But, I mean, that could losing to Auburn could be nasty.
Oh, it'll kill them. It'll take them out of the national championship. It'll propel Auburn up into the top 4 probably, but it won't make them 1 or 2 because you're going to have teams that are undefeated that had decent schedules. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, what's interesting is Alabama and Auburn on the same side. So if Alabama has one loss and it's the Auburn and Auburn's beat them, does that put Auburn in the title because they both have one loss in the conference? How are they going to settle that?
Well, no, if Auburn beats Alabama, they play the last game of the season, Auburn will go into the SEC championship. Alabama's ass out.
Even though they would be both 9-1 in the conference?
They both will have one loss, and head-to-head, Auburn will have beat Alabama.
Okay.
So Auburn will go, and that will fuck Alabama up. Yeah. Alabama will be fucked up if that happens. They won't even be in the SEC. As good of a team as they were, they almost started the season and almost ran the season. They could lose that last game of the season and have almost run the table at number 1 and be out of the SEC conference.
Now, Auburn still has to beat Georgia and Alabama. So, I mean, their next 2 games are nasty, but I think Auburn's on a roll. I think, and Georgia's not doing too hot. So
Where's that game being played? It's being played in Alabama, right? Or is it being played in Auburn?
I think it's being played in Auburn.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what, that's to me is the toughest game of the season.
No, actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, Georgia at Auburn.
At Auburn. That, to me, is the toughest game because it doesn't matter. When Auburn sucks, they play Alabama hard because it's such an interstate rivalry. It's huge rivalry. It's the biggest rivalry. I mean, Auburn, if you ask anybody from Auburn, they're going to be like, they hate Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be fired the fuck up for that game, man. They can't. Neither one of those teams can have a slow start.
And if everything stays the same, it's either going to be Alabama or Auburn versus Missouri for the SEC title. And I don't think you can sleep on Missouri. This is what, Missouri's second or third year in the SEC, and they're already, looks like they might be playing for the championship?
Well, I think Missouri, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're sitting at number 6 in the BCS. Where are they at? They're where are they at? No, they're 9. They're at 9 in the BCS. So they can't, with that one loss. That loss hurt them.
Yeah,
but,
that loss does hurt them, but I'm going to tell you what, if they went out and win the SEC title, it might get them... put it this way, Oregon, if Oregon catches another L, they're done because they're going to have to play Stanford again, aren't they, in the title?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly, if somebody from the SEC loses,
Oregon can't put Oregon and Stanford are on the same side, so it looks like Stanford has got a clean road to the title. They're going to play Arizona State or UCLA.
Yeah. Arizona State or UCLA, more than likely Arizona State. Now, this is the thing with Stanford. Who did they take their loss to earlier this season?
Well, it wasn't in conference.
It
was in conference. Give me 2 seconds. I'm looking.
I think it might have been Arizona State or one of those teams, or UCLA.
Utah. At
Utah. That's fucked up. Yeah, they can't even redeem that loss. So yeah, who knows? It's interesting. It's very interesting because if Alabama loses, basically there will be no SEC team in the national championship if these other teams can run the table, and that'll be the first time in a long time.
And I'm correct, and people like yourself will be thrilled.
Yeah, I'll be happy as shit. I don't have a problem saying it. I'll be happy this year. Next year, I don't care. Let all the teams that are deservingly should be in there. I tell you what, if you ask me, unless Florida State goes in and destroys someone in the national championship, but I think the best teams in the SEC, absolutely. But I think people give them so much when the other teams in the SEC, now it's got to the point because the champions come from the SEC in the last 6 years that people just disregard the other conferences. People still are like, okay, are disregarding what Urban Meyer's doing up there in fucking Columbus. He hasn't lost a game in almost 2 years, and everybody's like, oh, it's who he plays. Who gives a fuck? You got to put teams in front of him. He still gets a shot. You know what I mean? And you saw what he did in Florida. He won some championships. So I think, and you saw what he did in Utah. So his resume speaks for itself. So I feel like Ohio State's getting shafted because of their competition. I don't feel like Ohio State's like a Boise State. I feel like they play Big Ten schools. They're not like SEC schools, but they're still fucking good schools. You know what I mean? And if you haven't lost in almost 2 years, I think there's something to be said for that shit. So that's why I want to see the playoff next year. You know?
Yeah, and I'm looking at point differentials and things of that nature because I'm trying to figure out just how good these teams are and are they close. And Ohio State's doing better than I thought. I think their closest game was 7 points to Wisconsin.
Yeah,
so
to Wisconsin.
That's impressive. But when you have Illinois and Indiana left, and then you follow it up with a weak Michigan, they didn't out of conference. They played San Diego State and Buffalo and California.
Yeah,
and FAMU. That's not real. You got to schedule tougher out of conference opponents. You can't tell me that some team from the ACC wasn't going to play you. Some team. I don't know. That just seems kind of.
The only thing that Ohio State can hope for is they got to hope that a lot of teams from 5 to 15 lose, and Michigan State can climb up the rankings, beat Nebraska this week, which they probably will do, and go into the Big Ten championship with only one loss and way up in the BCS, maybe at 11, 10, 9 in the BCS when Ohio State meets them and then beat them. That will help their cause.
And right now they're on a collision course with Michigan State. Michigan State is pretty much,
yeah.
I want to say they handled, most of the season, they handled all their opponents with the one loss to Notre Dame, at Notre Dame 17-13. They got at Nebraska, at Northwestern, and Minnesota left. So I think if Michigan State runs the table and wins like they're supposed to, they're going to give Ohio State a fit in that game.
Yeah. That's correct. We'll see. I thought Wisconsin was going to do it. I thought these other teams were going to do it, but it seems like no one's doing that to Ohio State.
No, the other team, Baylor's had one. I mean, everyone wants to talk about the point discrepancy. Baylor's had one 10-point game, but Baylor, Florida State, Ohio State are just absolutely blowing out the teams they should. So it's real hard to say, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I mean, they are just annihilating the teams they should. Alabama, as much as people don't want to hear it, they're starting to come into their own. For people who were banging on them early in the season for not winning by enough. Now, I mean, no one said that for the last since I think
beating
week
LSU. Beating LSU the way they did this past weekend was impressive to me. I didn't see that coming. I thought it would be it was a close game for the first couple quarters, and then it just like Alabama wears you down.
The second half, the wheels fell off, and they just destroyed LSU.
And that's the thing, George, why I agree with you about the Florida State. The one thing you can say about Nick Saban and these Alabama teams are no team in the country has the depth they have. I mean, you can sit there and fuck with them and be close for the first, but they have 2 and 3 rows of players, man. Whereas your team gets tired, you don't have the substitution. They have substitutions that could start on the best teams in the fucking NCAA. I mean, and that's the thing, and that's what wears on you when your guys are getting tired. They can't go up and down the field as fast. You have to put in a substitution, and this guy hasn't seen any playing time. That's the separation. That's the separation between Alabama and the rest of these teams in the country, in my opinion.
And I'm right there with you. And looking back over Florida State's schedule, I'd like to say they got tested against a power line them up, punch you in the face offense, and it was at Boston College, which, I mean, I don't think Boston College has been relevant in 10 years. And they won by 14.
They were relevant a couple weeks ago when they fucked up Virginia Tech.
Right. They handled Clemson, which I think is impressive, but Clemson doesn't play a style like Alabama. Alabama is a very physical, double tight team that lines up and smacks you in the mouth. They're going to run in between the tackles. They're going to tell you we're going to run in between the tackles, and then they do it.
Right.
And I think this weekend, watching them play LSU showed me that they're not as slow as you think they would be when they play that style of offense. Their offense is fast. Their defense is fast. I think Alabama's going to be in the national title game because I don't foresee anybody beating them. I think they're going to handle Auburn. And then Florida State or Ohio State or Stanford are going to have their hands full trying to beat Alabama.
Yeah. That's agreed. It's agreed. I'd love to see Bama. If Bama goes, which obviously I think is going to be the case, I'd love to see Bama and Florida State. That's what I want to see.
Oh, I'd love to. I think everyone in the country outside of Ohio would love to see that game.
They still want to see that game. I think that'd be a great game.